Horror is a tricky thing to get right, and sometimes it's an even trickier thing to enjoy. You're supposed to be scared by horror films, or at the very least feel tension before the inevitable release. Sadly, once you figure the beats and rhythms of the genre, there's every chance you'll be numb to its appeal. Now, I love horror, but that's more for the concepts at work, the craft and the inventiveness of its legions of ghouls. The raw emotional response that it encourages is often lacking these days, and despite the genre's healthiness in games, it doesn't seem to be ably served by the medium. In games, jump scares are de rigueur. They're the thing that games fall back on to engage its audience, and because they're entirely fabricated realities, it's very easy to render a spook out of nowhere without worrying about getting an actor to react appropriately, or getting a camera to move in the right way, or to pay for expensive visual effects, and so on. It's rather telling then that the best horror films are often the ones with practical effects, or at the very least very tasteful use of CGI, so that the viewer's mind is doing the bulk of the work. A gory death is often less scary and more amusing, whereas a character being picked off by an unseen entity can be many times more effective. As a rule, the less seen, the better. Therefore, in my mind, it makes sense that horror games suffer quite a lot, as they have no threshold of realism to push past. Their monsters and scares are only as real as the world that they have been created to occupy. The problem then stems from the fact that games feel that they must always show rather than tell, and right now they just aren't very good at showing. Now, that might sound deliberately pessimistic or controversial, but I do believe it. I think games are wonderful at creating great visual designs, and you can look at Bloodborne for a recent example of that, but scares in games are either manufactured or converted into weird mechanical exercise just via lost progress. On the other hand, Duskers is a genuinely and horrifically tense game, not because of how much it throws in your face, but because of how little. Its aesthetic is that of Alien, The Thing, Silent Running, Space Odyssey, and Assault on Precinct 13. It's about immersing you in a reality that is impossible to uncouple from, because it doesn't attempt to emulate a world to play in, but instead it creates a one-to-one interface into a tension-filled world of abandoned space stations. Its visuals are incredibly, and at first perhaps off-puttingly minimalistic, and that's its great advantage. If we compare it to, say, Alien Isolation, that lovingly crafted game that recreates the world of Ridley Scott's film in vibrant, film stock aping detail, then Duskers comes out on top. Isolation is a wonderful game, I really enjoyed it, but its entire central conceit was, in my mind, very temperamental. The Alien AI often acted out of character, and it didn't always look great either. It was also ever present in the world, nearly always chasing you down to eviscerate you if you made a wrong move. The ironic lack of teeth isn't entirely the game's fault, but it is partly the fault of it existing based on a previous movie. The alien is now a known quantity. In Scott's original film, it isn't seen until roughly an hour in. The first full body shot occurs roughly 20 minutes later, and in total it has less than 4 minutes of screen time in a film that's around 2 hours long. Restraint is very much the order of the day, but the set design and the nature of the creature both played really well into each other. Its dark biomechanical form matches the leaky chiaroscuro corridors of the ship that it finds itself a passenger. Essentially, I think, the alien is a timeless design. Giga created something so evocative and fearful that it still provokes gross reactions to this day. The deep-seated Freudian fears ring true, and Ridley Scott's languorously paced film is the perfect foil for the shocking design. A 20-hour game that essentially stars said creature suffers from the fact that its antagonist is now very much a fragment in a culture text. Mugs, t-shirts, and plastic models in geek culture shops, it's a visual entity that is firmly in the realms of creatures such as Frankenstein's monster and Dracula as one of the most terrifying things the average person could ever see themselves getting a resin bust of to put in their bedroom. The hissing, clicking machine of acid and teeth, all erotic and insectile, is as overused as it is brilliant now. By becoming a culture text, its visual signifiers are decoding into pop culture references, and it becomes a source of tension in the game only because it threatens to render progress null and void. So you might be asking, why all this spiel about Alien Isolation when this video is clearly a look at Duskers and all the footage is from Duskers? Well, it's a matter of context really. Alien Isolation is a big budget game with incredible visuals, and its central source of threat was rendered lovingly, yet largely without any kind of malice to the player. I wasn't particularly scared of it after a while, which isn't to say I'm putting my leather jacket on and lighting a cigarette on the heel of my boots. I just found the Working Joes more scary. They were unnerving due to their Michael Myers style slow plod and their creepy Hal sound bites, but then on the other hand they were more easier to combat, so they presented less of a threat to progress. The reason that I'm doing all this talking about visual scares and monsters becoming culture attacks and the unexpected restraints of a AAA graphics engine is because Duskers works by understanding both the pros and cons of visual information and what the limits of the game's interface are. It works, I think, because its visual aesthetic and central conceit put you further in the role of a character than any first-person game could ever hope to muster. That might seem counterintuitive, but I do genuinely believe it. You're a lonely scavenger with a crew of drones fated to explore derelicts in a hunt for scrap, fuel, and some clues as to what has happened to this universe while you slept. Unlike, say, an FPS game or a third-person game, your input method is the same in real life as it is in the game. You sat in a chair, you have a monitor, and you use a keyboard to command your drones. There's something undeniably effective and strangely enthralling in typing out rudimentary commands to a fleet of little robots as they explore silent hulks in the vacuum of infinite space. It might appear a little kitsch at first, but it's also incredibly logical. Risk by proxy in a dead universe seems much more palatable than strolling headfirst into a potential floating casket. The predatory hum and whir of mechanical workings is all pervasive as you play, only interrupted by the blips, boops, scrunches, and hisses of your drone's visual input systems. Play is abstracted down to the simplest of things: explore without being seen. It requires a methodical, patient, and pragmatic approach. A single door left open too long, or a room not thoroughly vetted before entry has the potential to thwart hours of play, and the drone camera feed and ship schematic view gimmicks transcend their novelty, becoming the locus for an incredibly mature atmosphere. Each drone has a slightly different audio whistle, a not quite regulation video feed. Sometimes they lose their feeds right as you're passing by a door that's emitting a buzzing sound, and you panic and hit escape instead of space, pausing the game on a black screen instead of popping to the schematic view to see if it's a swarm of something that will pick your drone apart, or just a servo spinning listlessly in the unseen bowels of the ship you're exploring. The game gives you various methods of exploring, from interfacing with computers, sending out probes, dropping static room sensors, to motion sensors on your drones if you're lucky enough to find them. They all play with the same few ideas though, allowing you to ascertain if something is in a room by exposing a sensor to it, or gaining a semi-reliable readout of an adjacent room. Unwrapping the procedurally generated ships to get to the delicious scrap at the middle is kinda like playing with a Kinder Egg that may or may not have a spring-loaded spider inside its little plastic egg. Rooms you are certain have something in are often blissfully empty, whereas other rooms you need to get through but have to take a gamble on offer you a garbled flash of something moving before your drone, and then subsequently probably your entire little fleet of robots, are taken to pieces with alarming rapidity. I think Misfits Attic's real genius here is in keeping things hidden for as long as possible. It's a tough game to play in short bursts, as exploration and progress can be achingly slow, and your drone's modules slowly break with multiple uses, and they might even fail outright without warning. Everything's falling apart and the universe does not care about you. Things will eat your drones, they'll shoot them, pounce on them, or maybe even reduce them to their constituent molecules as video feeds wink out before you can get an accurate read on what particular threat you may have accidentally stirred from its deep space slumber. These short bursts of frenzied panicking are totally at odds with an interface that demands precision and logic for every action. You can't just rely on your reactions here to headshot a critter, because your drones are slow, they operate remotely, and they're your eyes and ears into a totally hostile world. I've no idea how Duskers really plays after a few hours, to be honest. I know that it has difficulty options that let you tweak its core mechanical systems like Invisible Ink. I know that you can upgrade your stuff. I know that you can get guns, you can get defense systems, scanning systems, and so on and so forth. In essence, it is a roguelike, and that's something that we said was dead with Gungeon. But in the end, it's more than that. It's one of the few games that manages to take the standard control for PC games and turns it into an intravenous portal into a world that feels breathtakingly real. It pushes through the screen and directly into your mind. As you hunch over your keyboard and agonise over every last keystroke, the tension is pretty much unbearable, and the scares are some of the scariest that I've ever had in a game. Depending on your point of view on roguelikes, Duskers might be a brilliant game. It might be a terrible game. It might be an utterly inconsequential game because you just don't really care about roguelikes and there are so many of them out. To me, none of that's important. I don't care what kind of game it is. I wouldn't even really classify Duskers as a traditional roguelike. I think it's a much more involved experience than that. What I find important is that it's a true successor to an absolute landmark film that really nails the atmosphere in a way that many other games just simply haven't even approached. It's far more than the sum of its parts. It's an almost aesthetic experience, an exercise in incredible restraint, with a huge focus on details, and it demands a real kind of patience and dedication from its players. When you trip up and open the wrong door, and the muted alerts in the input window let you know your drones are under attack, you begin to panic and flick between their monitor feeds in vain, desperately trying to get them out. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. You can just restart the game. You can even tweak it to make it easier if you want. It is a video game after all. But in the heat of the moment, you genuinely care. You're absolutely terrified. You don't know what it is that's stalking your drones. You try not to look at it. You see flashes of red on the monitor, and you see video feeds fade to static. And then you're left cycling between dead video feeds. All your drones are dead. You're stuck on a spaceship, and you're doomed to die a lonely death until you hit that restart button. But again, whilst you're in the zone, you sit there, pressing tab, flicking between video feed 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then you keep doing it with increasing futility as you realise that this really is the end. Please go out and buy this game and support Misfits Attic, because they've created a gem here, a rare little insight into a genre that's ill-served by video games. And with your support, they might be able to go on to create even better things. Hi, I hope you liked the video. If you like the look of the game, please go out and buy it. You should support developers like this. They don't come along very often. If you disagreed with anything that I said or you agreed with it, please leave a comment. Discussion for stuff like this is really cool. And if you could give us a subscribe, maybe share with your friends and stuff like that, that'd be great. We also do other videos, sketches and things like that. Take a look then. See you around, kid.